Have you ever challenged someone's beliefs only to have them say, well, at least I'm not as bad as those people? That's a common fallacy called whataboutism and is used to deflect a critical eye from one's own bad reasoning by appealing to the worst consequences of some other belief, hence the fallacy. But the real danger of this kind of fallacy comes when the more moderate belief actually enables the more extreme beliefs and provides social cover for those that hold those beliefs. Your moderate Christian friends might talk about how their religion is all about peace, love, and harmony, but at the end of the day, their God belief is still not rationally supported. And if an irrational belief is seen as acceptable simply because the consequences aren't as bad as they could be, then you're undermining the strongest tool available for combating those extreme views. So it could be argued that the moderate beliefs are even more dangerous because they give the extreme beliefs air to breathe. What's your take on moderate religious beliefs? Are they a stepping stone to a more rational society, or are they simply sheep's clothing covering a more dangerous wolf? We have open lines, so give us a call because the show is starting right now. All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is December 7th, 2025. I'm your host, Scott Dickie, and joining me today is the amazing, the wonderful, the man, the myth, the legend, Christy Powell. How are you doing today, Christy?
Howdy. I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for getting us fired up.
All right. Yeah, I want to. So today, in between our calls today, and I do see we have calls lining up. I do want to talk a little bit about this idea of moderate religion causing, providing some kind of cover. Do you have any initial thoughts on that before we kind of get the show rolling here?
Only that I'm kind of fascinated. Like I can really play both sides of the argument, good, bad, liberal Christianity, all of these kinds of things, but always I'll be doing it from a place of kind of curiosity because that shit just never made sense to my autistic brain. Like when I was a Christian, I was a hardcore, dedicated, dogmatic, zealous, problematic Christian. And, now that I'm an atheist, I'm the type of atheist who gives up his Sundays to do this type of work with you and other fine folks. So, not to say that the only way to believe in an ideology is to be like zealous and passionate about it. But the whole notion of that sort of watered down, soft, we have to interpret the Bible type of Christianity is really confusing to me. And I'm excited to hear people's thoughts on it.
Yeah, cool. Hopefully we can have some good conversations on that today. Just a reminder to everyone out there, Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we do have open lines, although the calls are starting to come in. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can call from your computer at tiny.cc/call-th. We do air live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central on YouTube. But remember, you can't make it. If you can't make it for whatever reason, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. So let's go ahead. I do want to squeeze this in here. Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. So I did mention that the calls are starting to come in. So Christy, what do you think we just jump into our first call right off the bat here?
Yeah, good by me. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So let's bring in Donald. Donald is an atheist calling from Louisiana. Donald, he, him. Let me pull him up here. There we go. Donald, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Donald. So just to give everyone a little bit of quick background here, you and I have been kind of having an ongoing discussion over the last several weeks about this idea of there being mathematical truths. And you're suggesting that there are some mathematical truths or maybe physical truths or some truths in general that are prescriptive. Did you want to continue on with that discussion today, or do you want to take things in a different direction today?
I did want to continue with that discussion, but the discussion the topic you just brought up, I'm actually a little bit interested in that too, about if softer religions are,
Sure. Well, let's start with that. What are your thoughts on that? On the idea of moderate religion actually providing cover for more extreme views? What are your thoughts there?
Well, they can be. Okay, like if you have if you have or if you have organized religion and that has some kind of hierarchy system, and the people in it may have softer views, but they're not willing to, question the authority of their church or organization, and they're not willing to question their own views, then you could say all it takes is for just one dogmatic leader to take over and warp that organization. But if they have softer views, but they're more open-minded, and they're willing to more question both like the hierarchy of their church and their leaders, and they're willing to question their views, and they're actually listening. And like some people, they'll have soft views, but they're confident that they're right in their religion, and they won't listen to other points, and they'll cherry pick things in their mind. And so no matter, it's very hard for, they're convinced that they're right. That's the certainty is, I would say, the main problem. But there are people with softer views that they're really trying to come to truth. They just might not be understanding a concept or something, or it's a belief they've had for a really long time, or they have an emotional attachment to it, or many other things, or it just makes sense to them. Those people, I don't think it's really it's going to be a vehicle for more dogmatic and I don't know, aggressive religion, because they'd question it. I think they have higher values of I don't know, kindness and that trumps their fervent belief in the hierarchy of religion.
So you're saying that, from your perspective, the moderate views are the ones that are being more considerate, more in line with the quote unquote spirit of the religion. That's very different than what Christy was just talking about with his experience. Christy, what would be your feedback to what Donald is saying here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can take that notion that anything that we get too dogmatic about, we're kind of missing the mainstream, or we're missing like the central purpose of any sort of ideology. But I don't know, when I look at like very soft sort of liberal Christianity in particular, I have to wonder, well, what's it grounded in? While I am here doing this type of advocacy work and really working against the dangers of fundamentalism, at least it's an ethos, right? Like at least we can point to, well, this comes directly from scripture, and this is something that we truly believe was handed down by God. Whereas if we're doing this more like modern interpretation, watered down version of things, then it does seem so much more arbitrary. And it's hard for me to see that as truly the spirit of the thing. I don't know. Does that make sense? I know this is all very kind of vague and nebulous language.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there definitely was more dogmatic and literal interpretations historically of like the ethics in like Christianity and Judaism and stuff. But well, okay, we're talking about religion, but we're primarily focused on Judeo-Christian religion. Is that all right if we continue on that lines? We're not talking about other like Hinduism or Buddhism. We're sticking with Judeo-Christian.
Sure, that's an easier place to start, or at least one sandbox that we can sort of stick to for the moment.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, there definitely was more strict rules. The church played more of a place in people's lives, and nowadays, in some ways, it's more liberally interpreted and stuff. And like people have other ethics of like civil rights and stuff that they like kind of like Frankenstein with it. But
Sure. And they have the ability to church hop or to find a faith community that lines up with the type of Christianity or the type of religious experience that they're looking for in a way that is kind of unique to this moment in time. I don't want to say that it was just invented yesterday, but for much of the history of Christianity, you had the town preacher, and that was the town preacher. That was pretty much your only opportunity to like study the scripture, to be a part of the community, to participate in Christianity.
Yeah, cars and the internet have definitely changed and given people a lot more options. So I don't.
Do you think that having more options fuels this idea that people can? I mean, if we give people a selection, if we give people options other than the hardcore church that's on their block, do you think the fact that modern technology is enabling this kind of shopping around to find what resonates well with you? Do you think that is feeding some of these more moderate takes on religion?
I definitely do, but there's also, in some ways, but there's also, like, let's take the internet, for example. It can do that, but it can also, by the algorithms, social media, and now AI, it could put people in kind of echo chambers. And for some people, it may let them shop around, but in other ways, they can get into a more radical community and get into echo chambers, and they can become more extreme. So I think it's
not just self-selection. There's also like an environmental push, oftentimes towards the extreme.
Yes. Yes. There definitely can be, especially if you involve politics in this, but I would say, okay, for me, the main thing is if they're willing to question their belief, it's whether or, like, a lot of people, you ask what it's centered around, a lot of people, it's community. So to them, they actually, like, I know in the Bible it says you're supposed to love God more than you love your family, but I don't think that's true for most people. Like, at the end of the day, community and their family is, for a lot of these more modern people, is their core value, and then religion and the church is kind of a social glue and a place to do charity and connect with your other friends and family members, and to do good works, and to feel like you're contributing to something more meaningful in your life. So I would argue for people who are more willing to question, and they have a value other than just, the church, the priest says this is God's will, and they have values that are more important to them, like their family's well-being or some other, or freedom, or some other values they have, then I would say I don't think that's a vehicle for radicalization, because it's more just like a social glue for them.
So what you're saying is that people can insert their own morality, their own judgment, their own way of thinking what's right and what's not right, what's the way that things should be, what's the way that things should not be. And so I think where the rubber meets the road is when those strongly held personal beliefs clash with the religious beliefs, so then we're going to be looking at least two different groups of people. We're looking at the people that will soften the religious message to accommodate their sense of morality, their sense of right and wrong, their sense of, being productive member of society and that kind of thing. So the one approach is to soften the religious beliefs. And then, of course, the other approach is to crystallize and to harden those religious beliefs and set aside your personal perspective. And so I think that's one of the things that leads us to these two groups. And I kind of, that's what I was referring to in the opening when I said that the moderate beliefs can be more dangerous because they head off that primary tool that we have for pointing out problems with these beliefs, and that is the idea of rationality and reason. If both of the religious beliefs are not being supported by reason, and if they are, I'd love to hear that. So if you think that I'm being off base and by quote unquote assuming that religion is not rationally based, please call in. We got the number right down here. Give us a call, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. But if we have these two groups, one of them is prioritizing the content and one of them is prioritizing humanity, I suppose you could argue. And so that's where we get that clash. What are your thoughts, Donald? We'll kind of wrap this part of the call up because I do want to get to the other stuff that you wanted to talk to. But what are your thoughts on the idea that the moderate believers providing shelter for these more extreme believers? The idea that, well, I mean, what I'm doing is good, and so that makes it okay to set aside that rational thinking, set aside that reasoning process, to accept those beliefs, because in their mind, the religious beliefs are leading to those good outcomes, leading to the love and the harmony and the acceptance and the support and the thriving. And whereas the people in the other camp see that as a failure, see that as a betrayal even. Do you have any opinion on that distinction there?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think there's two main groups like you're saying, but I mean, each person is an individual and they have their own, and they're influenced by their community. But it's like if they're willing to question how far they have abandoned reason. So it can be if they have complete certainty, or they've completely abandoned reason, and they are like, this is just what I believe. And then when someone else uses those same beliefs to do horrible things, they make excuses for them, and they literally don't see it, or they ignore it, or they're biased in their mind. They have like cognitive dissonance with it, then yes, it can definitely be a vehicle, because they will come in and they can shut off conversation, and they could be like, well, I'm not like that. Or if you criticize the religion, they'll say, oh, well, that's not a true Christian or something. And they can block off conversation while something worse festers. But if they are more, but if they're more open-minded, and they do try to come to things with reason, including their belief, and they are not, just ignoring more radical elements, and they're willing to confront them and not make excuses for them, then I don't see them. They're not contributing to the problem. They can actually, in a lot of ways, try to stop it at its root. But
it seemed like a lot of that is tied up with justification, and I want to ask Christy a question here. Christy, you're a licensed therapist, and so you deal a lot with examining people's motivations and that kind of thing. Do you think there's a strong, in the human psychology in general, do you think there's a strong motivation to justify a moderate belief in this case by using this tool, by saying, at least I'm not them? Do you think that's do you think that's a natural human tendency?
Yeah, I definitely think that it shows up, and I think that it, in some ways, motivates us to not feel like we have to examine our philosophies. Like, there's an element of, at least I'm not one of those extremist weirdos. But then I think there's also an element of, I want to be an extremist weirdo. I have this sort of like anti-establishment perspective, or things along those lines. So I think to a certain extent, we do self-select into the middle of the group, or we, put ourselves where we want to be in the Overton window. And then it does sort of help to fill out the larger piece, regardless of where we aim for. It provides space on either side of things. I don't know that that is unique to religion in any kind of way, and I don't know that that is anything that can be avoided, to be honest with you. Like, just because I'm an atheist doesn't mean that I want to take responsibility for Stalinism.
Right.
Being pro-democracy doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have one particular viewpoint on George Washington or Robespierre. So, there is always going to be some element of, yes, well, we share this one belief, but at least I'm not like them. And that can be on an individual level sort of defining and can motivate us to draw in any particular direction. But I think that's going to be true of any philosophy that we really consider here, any political position that we consider.
Do you think it's like a defense mechanism of sorts? Do you think it's a way of wanting of like trying to tell yourself it's okay that I'm doing this?
Yeah. And I think we see that in the way that people tend to deconstruct religion. Most often, people go from evangelicalism or fundamentalism to a more moderate, softer type of faith-based Christianity, and then eventually into something that's kind of like woo-y or spiritual, and then eventually into agnosticism or atheism. It's rare for people to make like a sudden, instantaneous pendulum swing. And I think it likely often goes the other direction as well. People don't grow up in a non-theistic household and then suddenly find themselves in a like passionate, dedicated, zealous type of space, outside of some like major traumatic or inciting event. So, yes, it is definitely part of how we simplify our own journey, simplify our own understanding of these things.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christy. I really appreciate your insights on this. And Donald, thanks for humoring us and having this discussion. I know you originally called about something else, and I do want to make sure that we address that. So on the call screener notes here, we have there are ideas or information that are transcendental. So can you expand on that and then tie it into to our discussion that we had from last time?
Yes. Okay. What I think is from last time, prescriptive isn't the right word. I'm giving too much agency. It's more accurate to say that some rules or some ideas are necessary and they're constitutive, and I'm saying they're transcendental, like they exist independent of, well, they exist even without mass or energy or space or time. They exist outside of the universe. But to say they're prescriptive, it's giving too much agency, like a rule giver saying, "Oh, it has to be this way." There's there's not an option. It's not like do this or else, or it should be this way. For things to exist, it has to be that way. Otherwise, they don't exist. So it's constitutive. That's a more accurate word for it. So when I was using prescriptive, thinking back on the conversation, I was giving too much agency to what I was talking about.
Okay. All right. So you're kind of amending what your position was a little bit, or at least amending the way that you're describing your position.
Yeah. Prescriptive is not the right word, but I am trying to say that some information, some rules exist and independent of materialism, material reality, independent of space and time. Some information and rules exist and and are necessary for all possible worlds in order for a universe to exist.
Can you
Okay.
describe any of these types of rules? I mean, are they moral in nature? Are they physics based? Like, what
No, no,
would
no.
be an
Logic
example,
based.
or how would we get there? Okay, yeah. So logic based. Is there
Yeah,
one that you
we only
feel comfortable defining, or that you feel like you have been able to divine on any level? Is that a fair question?
yeah.
Even
The law of non-contradiction. That's one that I that I think is needed in all possible worlds. It's a necessary law.
isn't that just truth by definition? You know, I say a foot has 12 inches in it, therefore a foot has 12 inches in it. If I say that P equals P, but does not equal not P, then we're just sort of circularly defining something, or am I missing it?
Okay. So yes. Basically, a thing can't contradict itself. It can't negate itself. It can't be both true and false simultaneously. But yes, it is things like true by definition also follow. This has continued from previous conversations that I had with Scott about synthetic a priori knowledge. And actually, talking about that, did you ever finish reading the Cliff Notes, or was it the Spark Notes?
I did. I haven't finished it, but I have. I've put a good chunk into it, so I'm on the learning curve here. You're talking about the what was it? The Kant, right? The Kant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kant's idea of different categories of knowledge, in particular synthetic a priori knowledge. He like separates things. There's analytic, there's synthetic, there's a priori, and there's a posteriori knowledge.
So are you saying, are you so your amendment to your statement, or at least our interpretation of your statement earlier, do you think that Kant is not addressing prescriptive versus descriptive, or do you think is that kind of dead in the water as far as our discussion is concerned?
He's talking about the difference between necessary knowledge, and he's talking about things either being necessary or not necessary, and he's talking about things being universal or just for particulars. And his main idea is if there's transcendental knowledge, but no, he's not talking about prescriptive knowledge. Yeah.
Well, so then how is this tied to the idea of a God? I mean, it says on the call screening notes here that you're an atheist. I believe you're an atheist. And so I think that you originally presented this as a kind of a thinker, right? It's just an idea that's making you either rethink your position, or maybe, you feel like, oh, well, I can understand how they get there. Do you think that this concept of necessity, of there being necessary truths, leads to a God? Now, before you answer that question, I just want a quick touch on something that Christy was just saying about circularity in your definitions. If we say that the law of non-contradiction is true, the only reason that we can't also say that it's false is because of the law of non-contradiction. Now, that may not be specifically what Christy was saying about circularity, but that does apply here,
though. Yeah, that does apply.
Yeah. And so do you think that we're discovering some useful information here, or is this we're just chasing our own tail with this?
Okay, you could argue from this that it's a necessary axiom for pretty much all of logic, and you could argue it's possible that we are so limited in our cognition that maybe this could be false, and we just don't, and we think it has to be true just because of our limited minds. But the fact that you're not able to, if you believe, this is like saying, oh, well, the belief in the idea of truth is circular, because to try to prove or disprove it means you think it's either true or false. Like, at a certain point, you have to get anywhere, you do have to take somewhat of, I'm going to make a joke, a leap of faith of you have to have some kind of assumptions in order to have some kind of form of rational thinking. You need some axioms. You
need to get the ball rolling somehow. Do you think that those the reliance on those axioms, and now I want to tie it back into what I was just asking about, how does this connect to the idea of a God? Do you think that this kind of leaves the door open a crack for believers? Do you think that this is a thread that we could pull on and eventually get to God? And let's see how many different metaphors I can use in here. Is this gonna lead us down that road to religion if we start taking these steps?
Yes. Okay. How this ties into the argument for God and why I think I can understand how they get there is basically two fundamental premises. Like, I believe that existence precedes essence, and that consciousness is an emergent thing from material things, and that you can't have a consciousness without space or time, or at least time. You need so it doesn't make sense to say, oh, there's consciousness before space and time. There's consciousness without space and time. But if you change those two premises, like if they believe consciousness can exist without space or time, that it's the most fundamental thing that all information stems from, and they believe essence transcends existence, they basically get to idealism, and everything's in the mind of God. So basically, the difference between what I believe and what a lot of like idealists or like St. Augustine's belief on God, and many Christians who are like taking Plato and stuff and Aristotle and making arguments for God, is two premises. So if you just change two of my fundamental premises, you get to where they are.
Okay. Do you think that do you think that those fundamental premise changes are reasonable?
Essence preceding existence, I think is wrong, but I think you can make arguments for it. Many philosophers have, so that's more reasonable. But the one on consciousness, I think people are just making a misunderstanding of consciousness. They're like they're believing in some aspect of a soul or stuff, and they're not recognizing how consciousness changes. I think they're misunderstanding, and they're not thinking about consciousness enough. But I can understand why they're getting it, because like a belief in like, oh, you're the same as you were when you were three, like, and the ideas of free will and stuff. These are like hardwired biologically in people's minds. So I understand, like, it's natural to feel this way, and it's why they can like look at all of these things, these complex things, and it's much bigger of a cognitive leap to try to figure out, oh, it emerged from things, it evolved, all of these processes, and the great time scales, and understanding probability, and understanding all of these things. That takes a lot more effort than to see that and think, oh, there's a designer, I'm going to ascribe agency because I think in terms of people and free will and the soul. I think those things are natural, like that's what we intuitively think, like as children and stuff. So I understand why they think that way, but I don't think it's right. I'm much more I don't think you can have consciousness without time. Like, how do you network information and make decisions without being bound by time? It doesn't make sense to me.
No, I definitely feel like I'm on board with everything that you're saying here. Mind-body dualism feels intuitive. Like, it feels as if there is some sort of soul, that there is something driving my body, that is the true essence of me. Even if, all of the neurology in the world overwhelmingly disproves that notion, it just feels true. And I think we can also look at studies of children and all kinds of different explorations of cognition and recognize that, like, imminent justice or ideas similar to karma feel sort of intuitive. I do a bad thing and a bad thing happens, therefore I caused it to happen, is just a natural assumption that we see in children and in unexamined adults. So I very much appreciate how we can get to some of these places. I guess I'm still a little bit struggling with how some of these conversations about intuition or cognition or what feels true versus what we understand to be true, how that can get us to this idea of transcendental law.
Okay. Well. Okay. Well, we're kind of been jumping here. I was just explaining.
Sure.
Like,
no, I appreciate
I
that.
hadn't really fully made the argument for that. I was just explaining how you get from like basically like Neoplatonism to like how you get to like beliefs in God, but I'm just explaining because if my whole worldview can literally be from what I'm thinking to what they're thinking can be changed by pretty much two premises, then I can't really fully dismiss their view. That's basically. When I first called, I was trying to talk about a possible interpretation and uniting it with many different ideas and philosophers for what could fit with our reality. And you have to do a little more arbitrary assumptions and some more mental gymnastics, but I can't fully dismiss it. That's what I'm trying to say. I can't be certain in my atheist belief when it can literally be changed by just changing two premises.
Yeah, and I appreciate that humility. I mean, I'm right there with you. I don't know if Scott and I have had this conversation exactly, but I think that most of the folks on this network, though certainly not all, fall into that sort of like soft atheism or that like 5 Dawkins scale or 7 rather, 6. Apologies. In any case, the notion that we can say with absolute certainty that there is no God, or we can say anything with absolute certainty, isn't something that we are all invested in. I know it's certainly not something that I can really come to. Even if functionally, yeah, I'm pretty confident. I didn't mean to speak for you, Scott. Does that line up with your point of view as well?
It definitely does. It definitely does. I'm on board with everything that you just said. I'm curious, Donald, though. So are you? What is your motivation for addressing this? Are you trying to examine your own level of skepticism, which is healthy, I think, to turn your eyes back on yourself, or are you looking at this as a way of trying to justify the fact that you're approaching things differently than these other people do, or why does this particular topic interest you?
Well, there's many reasons. I guess recently I just been talking with religious family members, and I don't know. They have they basically some of them have said things like, "Oh, atheists are so arrogant," or "Atheists just don't want God to exist," or just or are biased, or snide little comments like that. That basically what I usually think of as skepticism and trying to be open and minded but skeptical is that we're just being biased, in that we basically made a anti-religion. We're just as religious as dogmatic as like the fervent religious people or stuff like that.
Okay, so you're stepping up to a challenge, basically. You're people that you care about, your religious family members, people that you care about have said things that, atheists are dogmatic, or atheists are, indoctrinating youth, or whatever. And you're kind of maybe as either a self rebelling or something where you're saying, no, I'm approaching it this way. And I think that's fine too. That's a perfectly legitimate motivation, I think, if somebody's calling you out and you think that's an unfair accusation. But do you think that it's after having these discussions with you for the last, several times I've been on the show, a lot of things are starting to fall into place right when you said the phrase that you have religious family members? Because I think that the desire to fit into a family mold, the desire to rebel out of a family mold, the desire to interact with people that you really care about and whose beliefs are anathema to the way that you approach things. I think that we could probably have a whole series of shows just about this, the way that religious and non-religious people who care about each other, who are highly motivated to interact and to mesh with each other, but have these kind of stumbling blocks here. Do you think that at all is a motivation for you? Do you think that that's kind of guiding your direction of your own personal inquiry and your self-reflection, and the fact that you're seeking feedback from other people like us? I mean, do you think that that's kind of pushing you along this path?
Yeah, I mainly came to you because I called onto the Atheist Experience, and that's one of the popular talk show.
They're okay.
In the atheist community, and I was just trying to basically. I was like, okay, to be fair, I need feedback, because what if they're right? What if I'm biased or whatever? And let's see. But let's get feedback from people, and I'm going to steel man their arguments for religious belief as well as I can to make it fit with science as well as I can, and I'm going to see how this holds up. So I went to people that I thought, have a lot of practice on debating and could try to pick this apart, and let's see how the argument holds up. And I was just trying to be fair and give it as much support as I could, steel man their argument.
Right. Well, that's a very too rare. It's too rare that people do that kind of thing, but it's a very admirable approach to. It shows a commitment to the truth. Right. It shows that you're not married to your particular perspective, and that you're willing to explore in a perspective-free kind of environment, or at least as close as we can get to. I suppose as human beings, we can't entirely separate ourselves from our own perspectives, but it's really, I think it's a very productive. What you're doing is a very productive approach. I think it's, as Christy was saying, it's very humble. Intellectually humble, and like I said, is admirable to approach that things that way. So I think that I think that your approach is good, and I wish that more people would do that. I wish that more people would set aside their egos, would set aside their pet beliefs, would set aside their preconceived notions, And I wish we could have conversations that are in kind of this emotional, neutral kind of zone. And it's so easy to get egos tied up and to get our own perspectives tied up into our own identities. And so any attempts to examine things for their own merits, I think is worthwhile. I think I'd like to wrap up this call here, unless you think there's any loose ends that we haven't tied up yet, or we can maybe kind of wrap things for today.
Okay. Well, we are taking a lot of time, and there's other callers, but I didn't actually really get to the argument. But I'll just briefly.
You know what? We can spend a little bit more time on this. Why don't you summarize the argument you wanted to say, and then and if it draws us back into the conversation, cool. And if it's something that we can maybe chew on until next time, then we can do that well. So why don't you Please give us like a summary of what your argument was going to be?
Yeah. I was going to say everything that exists is one in some way. When we say something exists, we mean it holds together as a singular thing. It's not just a random pile of parts. A tree, a person, and an idea, even a molecule, is one thing with eternal unity. So unity isn't optional. It's a condition for existing at all. If something lost all unity, it would simply stop existing. Therefore, unity must be more fundamental than being itself. To be anything, something must be one. And then premise 2, every composite needs something that makes it one. If a thing is made of parts like atoms, limbs, or ideas, those parts don't automatically hang together. There must be something that holds them together, that makes them a single thing rather than a collection. That something, the source of unity, cannot itself be a one part, or else the question repeats. What unifies that part with the other? So everything composite depends on some deeper cause of unity. The chain of explanations can't go on forever. If every unity needed another unity above it, the chain would never end. And if the chain never ends, nothing would ever truly be unified. It would all hang on nothing. So there must be a first source of unity that is not itself unified by something else. A principle that is simple, absolutely simple, self-existent, and not made of parts. So yeah, I'm basically making the argument for like I'm making a Neoplatonist argument that's very similar to the first mover argument.
Yeah, I really appreciate a lot of these ideas and the way that you've strung them together, like that first notion of everything being sort of existentially connected. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this idea that the entire universe is represented in a single sheet of paper, because the paper is made from wood that was impacted by the rainfall and the sunlight and the magnetic storms and everything else that comes from the sun, which is being impacted upon by all of the gravity and in the universe. And so everything is connected is definitely a beautiful and poetic idea that I really appreciate. But then when we say that when we get to your second premise and we start talking about, well, what is it that makes it connected, or how do we define that? To me, it again just turns into truth by definition. Like, if we say everything in the universe is part of a singular universe, okay. But then we start talking about, well, what about the multiverse? Is that those things are independent or dependent or connected? And okay, well, they're still part of everything. So, all right, but definitionally, we'll say that it's all still impacting each other, or it's all still part of something. But it seems like this is all coming down to the way that we define it, the language that we use to describe it and to understand it. Is that fair? Is there something I'm missing here?
Okay, but what? Okay, I mean, to put it another way, I'm trying to say, like, if you define things as a set, like you define the entire universe as a set of things, the rules defining the set cannot all be contained in the set. I'm trying to say, hey, no, like you said, no matter how you define it, it's true by definition, but that also implies that the rules for everything, there's some underlying rules that cannot be contained in what we think of as everything. So my whole argument here is that there are some necessary rules that are transcendental, and they have to be, because otherwise it will lead to circular reasoning of, you say the rules are in the set that you're defining. So if we don't believe in circular reasoning, then therefore there has to be rules that exist, independent, transcendental to everything that we conceive of as existing. So I'm trying to basically say materialism isn't the whole truth, that there are things beyond materialism, because any way you define it to be consistent with logic, not all rules can be contained within the set that you're talking about.
So, but you are then, again, think back to how you defined the universe as a set of objects. So if you run into problems by defining the universe that way, how do you know the problem isn't with the way that you define the universe? Maybe the properties of set notation don't apply to the universe. Maybe the universe interacts ways that are differently, that particular math structure does not apply to this case. Okay. When you're making an argument and you run into a contradiction, that contradiction just means one of the things that you were assuming is not right. And so how do we know that the way that you've started with your definitions is not part of that problem, or at least, or maybe in its entirety?
I think it can be part of the problem, but I don't conceive of a way where you could define it. I'm saying I don't think there's a logical system, like every form of logic, you're going to run into this problem. And yes, my way of defining things may be wrong, but they correlate with and are useful for making predictions and doing mathematics, which in turn is used in science to make predictions. And I think over time, as we refine our axioms more and more, we get closer and closer and closer to the truth. And from the trend, I think that you're going to get to some fundamental axioms that are necessary in all possible worlds, and that it exists independent. Now, I could be just wrong, and I could just be how I'm defining it or the limits of logic. But I think I don't know. I guess my mathematical intuition, when I think about mathematics, I think of logic and I think of numbers and I think of shapes as some aspect of them being discovered. Like, I don't think everything about them is made up. It just, like, especially in set theory or category theory, the structure of mathematics and how all the different realms of math can all tie into each other. And some of to me, in some of the axioms, and it seems to me I guess my intuition is that they are necessary, and that you discover them. They are, I don't know, Platonic. There's transcendental forms, but I guess you could argue that's just my intuition, and I have a cognitive bias.
Yeah, Scott, forgive my liberal arts background here, but is this effectively the infinite hotel paradox?
In a way. I mean, what he's saying is that there must be some kind of outer structure supporting this, and I think that I think that, and you're talking about Hilbert's Hotel, the idea that it's a hotel that has an infinite number of rooms, and if they're all full, we can still cram as many more people into that hotel as we want to. And that really has to do with, it is related to what Donald is saying. It's the idea of taking our and I don't mean this in a negative way, but taking a naive interpretation of the concept and applying it where in a way that's not necessarily appropriate or does not necessarily lead to greater understanding. And so as I'm a math teacher by day, and so I very often I'm used to seeing people mistake or make mistakes or have mistaken conceptions of what is infinity, what is what is an infinitesimal, that kind of thing. And so it is a common misconception. And it is related to your third premise there, Donald, that the idea that this infinite chain can't be, that's really a bugaboo for me, because that is something that I see people lean on all the time. But when I ask for them to support that claim, they can't do it. And that is very, very susceptible to circular reasoning. People think, well, you can't have an infinite chain. And I think you even said this in your description. You can't have an infinite chain because then it never would have gotten started. It never would have had a starting point. But that's the assumption. You're assuming that things need a starting point in order to exist. And so your conflict comes when you make the assumption that things do need a starting point. Yeah, if you're assuming that things do need a starting point, of course you're going to run into conflict when you start suggesting the possibility that maybe it didn't have a starting point. But that, again, that conclusion, you can only come to that conclusion by first assuming that conclusion. If we're talking about a chain of causal chain or an infinite temporal chain or whatever it is we're talking about, here I think you were talking about more of a contingency kind of a chain, more of a explanatory chain.
Causes. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, in that case, you're assuming that there must be a beginning because you can't. And I think you used the word conceive. You used the word I think. You used the word I intuit. And so I think using those three words during your explanation, I think were very telling in that I think the breakdown is not necessarily your understanding of the concepts, but in your application of the concepts to reality here. And so if we want to be able to show that these mathematical concepts do apply to the world, then we need to be able to justify that. We need to be able to show that. And I think that was the big failure, sorry, to use a word that might sound a little bit too harsh. And it's I don't consider this to be a moral failing or anything like that on your part, just a failure to make your point when we were talking about the prescriptive, descriptive distinction, which again, now you've said is not exactly what you were talking about, but I think it's definitely related. And so it's the idea of there must be something outside of the universe that's holding the universe together. Do you think that might be a good one sentence summary of what your argument is? In order for the universe to be like it is, there must be somebody on the outside kind of holding it together or piecing it together or directing it to be a particular way. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I'm not saying it has to be a person. It doesn't have to be a consciousness, but I'm saying look, I mean, there's other arguments I have I think things like quantum information, you can show that there's non-local information in some systems, and if you can show that information can exist independent of mass and energy, then I don't think it's that much of a leap. Like we look at the structure of space and time, and to think, oh, information could exist independent of space and time. I do think I'm having a hard time. Some of this I'm having a hard time justifying, but talking about why I think you can't have an infinite regress of causes. I guess it's just I have beliefs in the principle of sufficient reason, or I think Like, if it just keeps on going forever, how do you have a distinction between, oh, there's this object or there's this idea and it's separate from this? If there was infinite hierarchical causes or hierarchical structure, how can you have structure? Because how can you have distinction without something fundamental? Like, if there's no fundamental base, then how can you have distinction? Because how can things order in relation to each other? I mean, an analogy would be like you have an infinite ladder, but there's no ground. Well, how can the ladder stand?
Okay. Yeah, that's a very common perspective on that. And I think that might be something that we can save for next time. We've been almost an hour on this call, but by the way, you're talking to you, Donald, is very fascinating to me. And so I really enjoy this. So I'm glad that you called back. I don't know about you, Christy, but my red flag went up as soon as the word quantum came out of his mouth. I mean, my skeptic sense started tingling.
It's been a really excellent conversation. And I think the lack of certainty here and the fact that in order to understand the possibility of the existence of God needing to necessitate abstract mathematics, that to me is just how we end up in a world with so many de facto atheists. And that's sort of where I kind of imagine this line of reasoning will ultimately get us. I certainly don't mean to proclaim that over you, Donald, but that's where I get hung up and that's where I get stuck. So interesting questions to be asking. I'm really grateful for the conversation, but I think we ultimately get to that place of, I don't know, but I know it doesn't really impact the way that I vote. It doesn't impact the way that I spend money or the way that I raise my kids. So while I'm interested to know, I also can only give it this type of philosophical navel-gazing space rather than part of my day-to-day life. And that's how I keep living. So free advice to use however you choose to use it, but I hope you'll consider some of those ideas. Thank you so much, Donald, for a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Donald. And I think we have some good fodder for our next time that you call in. And so I'm looking forward to that call. So thanks again, Donald. Have a great day.
Oh, wait, when's your next call? When's your next time?
I'm here every week.
Yeah. We'll have somebody on every week. I'm not sure. I think I'm on sometime in January. Will be my next one, but we'll keep you. We'll look for the schedule. I think they post the pre-shots on YouTube every once in a while. So watch for that. But anybody that you call into should be able to address this. All right, Donald, thanks so much for your call. We really appreciate that. I wanted to take a moment here to recognize some very important people that help us to support this show. We have video people, we have audio people, we have moderators, we have a note and stamp time stampers and call screeners and all kinds of stuff. And so I just want to give a shout out to our crew today, and let's show that crew cam so we can get a look at all these lovely people that are behind the scenes, kind of supporting the show, that really make Christy and my job very easy. So do we have the crew? There we go. Look at, boy, we have a full crew today, including shots of the yard there even.
Yeah, people hanging out outside the studio.
Awesome.
I miss the days of being in the studio every week. It's a fun piece of community.
I can certainly understand that. And every time I've been to the studio there, I've always had a great time. But it's the fact that we don't always go to the studio that makes it possible for people like me to participate in this. So I suppose I can't wish for those days to come back too much, because then I'll be excluding myself. So thanks again for the crew. We really appreciate all the work that you do. And like I said, it really makes our job up on the front here a lot easier. And speaking of that, I also want to say that astute viewers of the show might have noticed a very subtle ripple in the Talk Heathen universe, the Talk Heathen universe that we've recently happened. And that is that our producer has decided to hang up his producer spurs. So our producer, Richard Gilliver, he has decided he needs to take some of his free time and devote it to other things other than producing the Talk Heathen. He's been an atheist his whole life. He's been an activist for 12 years. 5 of those years with the ACA, and the last 3 years as the producer of Talk Heathen. So Richard will definitely still be part of the show. He will still continue to be a host. But I want to personally thank Richard. Richard was very instrumental in my getting involved with the ACA. My first appearance on Nonprofits was with Mr. Richard Gilliver, and he was also the producer who asked me to be part of Talk Heathen. So Richard, I want to personally thank you and for the efforts that you've done and you will continue to do for the ACA. Christy, do you have any favorite Richard Gilliver memories or stories or
Yeah, I've been volunteering with the ACA for 8-9 years now, and I've worked with a ton of folks, and I can honestly say there hasn't been anybody that I have enjoyed having produced the work that I'm on more than Richard. He's always on top of everything. He's always really excellent in understanding everybody's point of view and finding a middle. But my favorite thing about working with Richard is having somebody who I know will get on to me for misunderstanding the kalam or for like misinterpreting some of these philosophical arguments and just kind of loses shit over, we went over this. It's not an infinite regress. So those are like sort of semi behind the scenes moments where I'm trying to keep a straight face have been my favorite moments.
Right. Definitely. Richard is definitely someone who will tell it to you straight to your face. And I really appreciate that. So again, thank you, Richard, for all of your hard work. And of course, we'll continue to see you on Talk Heathen as a host. Another question I often find myself asking is, how do we build strong, supportive communities outside of religious frameworks? That's what we want to explore on our new section, Community Spotlight, here on Talk Heathen. And today's guest is doing just that. We're excited to welcome the executive director of Equality Texas, Brad Pritchett and Sophia Sepulveda. I'm sure a correction of the pronunciation of that name would be needed if I said that wrong. Brad, welcome to the show. You want to talk about the work that you do at Equality Texas and your Rainbow Rights show. Brad, how you doing today?
Doing great. How are y'all today?
Oh, doing awesome. Thanks.
It's been a good time.
Tell us about Equality Texas and the Rainbow Rights show.
So Equality Texas, we're the state of Texas's largest and oldest LGBTQ advocacy organization. We've been organizing for LGBTQ rights and equality for all Texans since 1978 here in the state of Texas. And we are getting ready to launch, actually we launched the first 2 stops of our Rainbow Rights Roadshow. And essentially what we're doing is we've taken all the data that we gather from our constituent services department when people are calling asking for support or reporting discrimination. And then we worked with organizations like the Trans Legal Aid Clinic of Texas, who help folks update their documents, change their name and gender markers before that was outlawed. And then some organizations like national organizations such as the Trevor Project that help field calls from youth who are in crisis. And they gave us all their data about Texas as far as where the calls were coming from. And what we did is overlapped all that data together to identify 15 priority counties in Texas where we were getting calls where people needed access to healthcare, access to legal support, access to general mental health support. And that's where we're taking the Rainbow Rights Roadshow. So the goal is we're going to visit these first 15 counties in Texas, kind of some urban counties, some very rural parts of the state. And we're taking some education.
Diving right in then, huh? Diving right into the thick of it.
Don't ask the question if you don't want the answer, I guess.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, please do.
But we're going to be visiting these 15 counties as a start and delivering some educational resources and then physical resources. And right now here in Austin, there's a donation drive happening at the ACA office where folks are bringing in supplies that we can take with us all across the state as we launch the Rainbow Rights Roadshow.
Cool. That's very interesting. Christy, I know that your professional life overlaps quite a bit with LGBT issues and gender issues. What's your take on this Equality Texas and the Rainbow Rights show?
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful that y'all are doing this kind of work and honestly wearing that target on your back right now. You know, as you mentioned, the notion of changing your gender markers has become incredibly difficult and problematic in the state of Texas. Even, you know, having acknowledged that you took HRT at any point in your life is seeming incredibly dangerous. I so appreciate y'all offering community and support to these members of our society, because this is honestly dangerous and meaningful work right now.
We appreciate it, and we are determined to make sure that any Texan has the same freedoms and liberties that we all have a right to have access to. And some of the laws that are targeting specifically trans people fly in the face of the idea of a free society.
No argument here, definitely. And so yeah, that makes the work that you're doing all the more important, I think.
Well, and our field director, Sophia Sepulveda, is leading the Rainbow Rights Roadshow all across the state. So folks, when we launch the actual list of all the locations, we'd love to see people come out and join us to get some resources and meet Sophia and learn about the work we're doing.
So where could somebody find out that information? Do you have a website or something, or do you have where if somebody wanted to find out where those locations were, where would they look?
They can go to equalitytexas.org. Follow us on Instagram. We're at Equality Texas on every platform. And we're launching the actual 2026 locations at the first of the year. So we've only done 2 stops so far. We've done Williamson County and we're doing Travis County today. And then we'll be hitting the other 13 locations in the first leg of the tour starting in 2026.
All right. So exciting stuff. Thank you so much, Brad, for sharing that information with us. We'll see if we can try to get those links. That was equalitytexas.org. We'll try to get that information into the show description, so that way, if anybody missed it, they can look that up. But thanks again, Brad, for all the work that you're doing. We really support you here at the ACA, and I wish you all the best and success with your project.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
Take good care.
All right. So thank you, Brad, for doing that. And, because we really want to use these community segments to really shine a spotlight on great secular organizations. And for that, we rely on submissions. So if you're a part of, or you know of, a nonprofit organization, has to be a nonprofit organization working with secular or atheist causes, please email us at spotlight@atheist-community.org. We'd love to have them participate and share their events and stories with our community. And if you want to support this show as well, you can become a channel member. You can click the join button below on the video. You can get custom chat emotes, although I think the Scott Dickie emoji has yet to make an appearance in the chat options there. So we'll see. Maybe I can rattle a little cage.
Yeah, we got to get that working.
Get the ball rolling on that. But you'll get custom chat emotes, early access to clips and shorts, and you'll help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. Another way to support us is by sending super chats, and I do think we have at least 1 or 2 in there in already, and we'll get to those in a second. You can also like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and leave some comments below on your favorite caller or your favorite host or your least favorite caller or your least favorite host. Although, we try to avoid those as much as possible because our egos are all very fragile. And so we want to make sure that we get some positive notes going there. But speaking of supporting the show, another way to support the show is through Patreon. And we have people that make donations through Patreon. And so I want to take a moment here, and Christy, maybe you can help us out and tell us our top 5 patrons for this week.
Yeah, of course. Well, still at the top, we have number 1, Oops All Singularity, followed up by Dingleberry Jackson, Clevy Helvetti, and the number 4 spot, Carolyn Bygart. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Correct me where I'm wrong. And in our 5th spot this week, it says Scott. No follow-up, no other information. I'm just going to assume it is you, good sir. Thank you very much.
Scots of the world,
to all the Scots listening, thank you so much. And our honorable mention this week is Grob.
Grob. All right. I love that. I love the simplicity of Grob because it rivals the very skillfully elaborate oops all singularity and and our list of common favorites there. It's good to have just a simple Grob in the middle there. I love that. I love that. So thanks everyone who gives to us on Patreon. If you want to have your name read on the air, then please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/Patreon.
Sure. And Scott, here's one for your and my feeble ego.
Okay.
We did have a donation from my friend Alan Ferguson in the super chats saying, I know this is going to be a great show with Scott and Christy. I hope we did it justice.
Awesome. Yes, Alan, thank you so much for the $10 and for the vote of confidence in our hosting abilities. Alan, formerly involved with the ACA, but had left a couple of years ago and is now off doing his own thing. And so thanks so much, Alan. We really appreciate the support. Okay, I think at this stage of the game, let's bring up our backup host here, Kelly. Kelly, I'd like to get your kind of thoughts on how things have gone. We had a lengthy conversation with Donald. We kind of covered several different areas. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I was wondering, Donald was wondering, was like talking about distinctions just before the end of that call. And I was wondering, like, before he started thinking about all of this stuff, what was his problem with distinctions then, or wasn't he even thinking about it? So it seems like it's a real problem for him right now, but I bet you 5 years ago, it wasn't a problem at all. It wasn't even something he was thinking about. So, priorities, man. That's all I'm saying. Priorities.
Right.
No, it's great to be asking these questions. I think that they're interesting questions, but that was something I wanted to highlight as well, is just that you ultimately have to go about living your life, not necessarily understanding how infinity works, for one thing.
Right. Exactly. And then if you did figure it out, how is that going to change your day-to-day life? Right. It's probably not. And as you were saying, Christy, it doesn't have any effect on my life of day to day, on my wife, my children, nothing. It's just, it's fun to think about. Philosophy is good for coming up with questions to ask, but it doesn't really answer any of those questions, unfortunately. But it's fun to think about them, right?
For sure. Speaking of thinking, Kelly, I want to get your thoughts on what Christy and I were talking about earlier. We were talking about this idea of moderate religion, kind of leaving the door open for more extreme views, and kind of my thoughts on that are that there's a social protection there. That we are social beings, and of course there's peer pressure and social pressure to behave a particular way. We have social norms and things that are enforced just by the social activity within the community. And I think that one of the ways that moderate religion provides, gives air to breathe, as I said in the opening, gives air to breathe to these more severe, these more extreme views, is that it kind of gives us the impression that it's okay to believe in God. It's okay to have these irrational beliefs. And then they kind of get a little bit of shelter from that. What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, it's like a little stepping stone to irrationality, right? That if you look at it that way, that's the way I look at it. It is like opening that door to really bad critical thinking, or to non-critical thinking, as the case may be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree with you. It's just like saying, now I can't think of a good example right now, but it is.
Put you on the spot with Scott and Christy today.
Yeah. I'm blaming it on the stroke. I'm still using that as an excuse. I've been blaming everything on that, Mm-hmm. Oh, this window's jammed. That's because I had a stroke.
I want to ask a question to both Christy and Kelly here. So we were talking about how the moderate views can give shelter to the more extreme views. Do you think the reverse also applies? Do you think the more extreme views could, let's say, for example, we have somebody who's a moderately religious person, meaning that they incorporate some of their ideas of morality and some of their ideas that are right and wrong, that kind of thing. In conjunction, they kind of mix together the religious aspects and that kind of thing. But do you think that the more moderate believers take shelter underneath the extreme views as well, and so they feel like they don't have to be as critical in their beliefs because it's more beneficial to society or anything like that? Christy, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the Overton window stretches both ways. And I would definitely say that having the existence of very extreme views makes the mainstream views seem a lot more tolerable and a lot easier to sort of defend. And so, yeah, I do see even very sort of soft liberal Christianity as sort of dangerous or problematic, or at least like contributing to this sort of thing. While once again, just having to acknowledge that I think that that is always going to be true about every sort of belief system, that there is going to be this sort of range within it. And so, you know, to Kelly's earlier point about opening the door to irrationality, I think that we need to accept with some humility that irrationality is a uneven remainder, that's sort of a necessary bug in the system. Like, that's just the way humans human. We are never going to be rational creatures all the time about everything always. It doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it, but over striving, hypervigilance towards it can drive us towards absolute madness. So there's a certain amount of acceptance and I'll say again, humility around all of the beliefs that we hold. Again, back to the Dawkins scale and just sort of the vague acceptance of, I think I get how infinity works and I'm pretty sure there's not a God, but I'm not going to lose any more sleep than I already have in fussing through all of the particulars here.
So are you saying that you think that it's more of a practical limitation? It's due to the fact that we do have these imperfect brains, that we do have this imperfect thinking process, that we have to take that into consideration? Or are you saying that more in a okay?
Yeah, like if your version of Christianity is that you like to hear a sort of pleasant homily that endorses something vaguely moral, and you sort of participate in these rough traditions, and that's as much headspace as you have to dedicate to it, then you're not going to make time for unraveling all of these sorts of mysteries because you're too busy working on other aspects of life. I would argue that your understanding of the like fundamentals of the cosmos and what we exist on this planet to do, and whether we were put here with a purpose, is worthy of your time and attention, that you should be in some sense zealous or passionate or maybe even militant about some of these ideas because they do matter. And I think that we should all as a society be putting more effort into thinking through these things if we want to create a kind and just world. But that's just my perspective on how significant these questions actually are. And I can very much appreciate the person who just wants to go to church 3 times a month and leave it at that.
Yeah, definitely. Any words from you, Kelly, on as we...
I was just thinking another way that the moderate religion gives cover to or helps out the radicals is that they can say, but look at the 1 million members that we got that believe in this, right?
Sure.
They don't believe in that far radical religious ideas, but they're still Christians. Oh, we have so many, it can't, and how many times have you all heard that if so many people believe it, it can't be wrong? We realize that's a fallacy, but it doesn't always register with the people who are believing it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's another way it contributes to the problem.
Yes. I mean, I suppose the more different avenues that we can identify, the better prepared we can be to help usher. Well, I suppose that's kind of a conceited way of looking at that, right? Like we're the gatekeepers, right? We're ushering in this age of rationality, and I suppose that's kind of an arrogant way to say that. So maybe I should say we want to encourage what we see as being productive, being helpful, being good, being supportive, being loving of our fellow human beings. And so I really appreciate this perspective. And I appreciate both of you sharing the show with me today. Christy, you're one of my favorite hosts. And so anytime I get to be on the show with you, I really look forward to it. I think you're an incredible communicator, and I really appreciate you sharing your very human perspective on much of what we talk about. And Kelly, of course, you're the rock, right? You're the rock of the show here. So I really appreciate having you on. So for those of you all out there watching, just want to remind you, we're going to be back next week at 1 p.m. Central on Sunday. And if you don't believe, then
wait, love rings.
Oh, we got to do love rings. We got
to. Who you sending the love rings out to, Kelly?
Yeah, who do you want? Who are you sending your love to today?
I want to. Oh, they're coming out of my tie. I want to send my love rings to two people. One to Richard. Richard, I wouldn't be here I wouldn't be here except for you. You were really a big supporter of me in the early days, and I love you, man. I'm going to miss you. And number two, I want to send out love rings to who's no longer with us, but Jim Henson for donating Kermit's skin for my tie.
Okay. Christy, how about you? Who you sending your love rings out to today?
I just want to say thank you again to Richard for all of his hard work and dedication to this project. And then really to everybody who is sort of sorting out what does Christmas mean to me, to my family, to our belief system, to our willingness to get along with one another. These are, definitely tricky times in the world. So just sending out love and care and concern to everybody navigating those spaces this holiday season.
Definitely. I think I'm going to piggyback on that idea there. And I'll just add that, there's lots of people out there who kind of dread the holiday season because it maybe there's some aspects of their life that they wish were different, or there's a certain person or certain people that they wish were more a part of their life that are not. And so I want to send out my love rings today to anybody who struggles through the holidays due to loneliness or due to depression or due to just not feeling quite right. I want to encourage all of you to reach out and make a human connection with somebody else, whether it's you are the person who needs that connection, or maybe somebody that needs that connection too. So we want to send love rings out to everybody who needs another person, which is all of us, of course. And so now that we have the love rings taken care of, now I want to just say, if you don't believe this is your community, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate that you come and spend time with us. But if you don't believe, it's not that we hate you. It's just that we're not convinced. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Call 512-991-9242 or visit tiny.cc/call TW.